I agree with the principles that Jesus advocated, and that there's great wisdom in the teachings of Jesus, and I agree with those teachings. Jesus is one of the most popular personalities in history, but there are so many interesting details that aren't commonly talked about. In this video, we'll reveal 20 incredible facts about the life of this historical figure that might just change the way you see him. Get ready to have your mind blown. Number 20. We don't actually know what he looks like. Is this what Jesus Christ really looked like? Jesus has historically been portrayed like this, a light-skinned man with wavy brown hair down to his shoulders, with a full beard and mustache. The iconic look is featured in churches across the world. Surprisingly, the Bible doesn't describe Jesus' appearance. We don't know his height, hair color, or eye color. This might seem odd, given how important he is. Artists over the centuries have painted Jesus in many ways. He's usually shown with long hair, a beard, and light skin. These images come from European traditions, not historical facts. In reality, Jesus was a Middle Eastern Jew. He likely had darker skin, dark hair, and brown eyes, looking like other people from that region. Some people have tried to recreate Jesus' face based on historical and archaeological evidence. They suggest he might have had short, curly hair and a beard, which was common for Jewish men of his time. But we still can't be sure. Number 19. He fought with the leaders of the church. Despite the fact that Jesus is talked about as a man of peace, he actually had a lot of fights with the leaders of the church. These leaders were called Pharisees and Sadducees, and they usually clashed with Jesus. The Pharisees and Sadducees were powerful religious leaders who followed strict laws and traditions. Jesus, however, focused on love, mercy, and the true meaning of God's laws. This led to many disagreements. One big argument happened when Jesus healed people on the Sabbath, a day of rest. The Pharisees believed no work should be done on this day, but Jesus said it was more important to do good and help people, even on the Sabbath. Another fight happened when Jesus criticized the Pharisees for being hypocritical. He said they followed the rules on the outside, but didn't truly love God in their hearts. This made the Pharisees very angry. Jesus also overturned tables in the temple. The temple had become a marketplace, and Jesus was upset that it was being used for buying and selling instead of prayer. He drove out the merchants, saying they were disrespecting God's house. These fights with the church leaders eventually led to their decision to arrest and crucify Jesus. Number 18. He never wrote any of the books of the Bible, even though Jesus taught many important things and did many miracles. Master, who did sin? This man or his parents said he was born blind. Never had this man sinned nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. None of the writings in the Bible are directly from him. The Bible has two main parts, the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Old Testament was written before Jesus was born. The New Testament tells about Jesus' life and the early Christian church, but Jesus didn't write any of it. The four Gospels, which are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, tell the story of Jesus' life. These books were written by his followers and other early Christians. They wrote down what they saw and heard from Jesus. Matthew and John were two of Jesus' disciples. Mark was a follower of Peter, and Luke was a companion of Paul. So, while Jesus didn't write any books himself, his words and actions were recorded by those who knew him. These writings help us understand his message and continue to inspire people around the world today. Number 17. He was baptized by his cousin John. The Baptist was not just the man that baptized Jesus, he was also his cousin. John the Baptist was a preacher who baptized people in the Jordan River. When Jesus came to him, John felt unworthy to baptize him, saying Jesus should baptize him instead. But Jesus insisted, saying it was necessary to fulfill all righteousness. As Jesus was baptized, something extraordinary happened. When he came up out of the water, the heavens opened and the Holy Spirit descended like a dove onto him. A voice from heaven said, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased." And God the Holy Spirit came down upon Jesus in bodily form like a dove. And a voice came from heaven, "You are my own dear Son. I am pleased with you." Number 16. He came back to life shortly after being buried. The story of how Jesus came back to life not long after he died and was buried is one of the most interesting facts about him. In fact, it is so fascinating that till this day, Christians worldwide still celebrate his resurrection every Easter. Jesus was crucified and died on a Friday. His friends took his body down from the cross and placed it in a tomb. They rolled a big stone in front of the entrance to seal it. Soldiers were even placed there to guard the tomb. On Sunday morning, some women who were Jesus followers went to the tomb to put spices on his body. When they got there, they saw that the stone had been rolled away. Inside the tomb, they saw an angel who told them, "Jesus is not here. He has risen." The women ran to tell Jesus' disciples. At first, the disciples didn't believe them, but Peter and John ran to the tomb and saw that it was empty, just as the women had said. Later, Jesus appeared to Mary Magdalene, one of the women who went to the tomb. He also appeared to his disciples and many other followers over the next 40 days. They touched him, talked with him, and even ate with him. Jesus coming back to life showed his power over death and proved he was truly the Son of God. It also gave his followers hope and became the foundation of the Christian faith. Number 15. Jesus had brothers and sisters. We're starting off with a fascinating part of Jesus' life you might not have heard much about. His brothers and sisters. His brothers are named James, Joseph, also called Joses, Judas, and Simon. And he had sisters too, though the Bible doesn't tell us their names or how many there were. Different Christian traditions have various takes on these siblings. Some believe they were Mary and Joseph's kids, making them Jesus' biological brothers and sisters, but others, like Roman Catholics and Eastern Orthodox Christians, think they were either Joseph's children from a previous marriage or even Jesus' cousins. They think this because they believe Mary remained a virgin her whole life. Growing up, Jesus' brothers and sisters lived with him in Nazareth. They would have seen Jesus as a normal family member. But when Jesus started his ministry, his brothers did not believe in him at first. Interestingly, after Jesus' resurrection, one of his brothers, James, became a devoted follower and a key leader in the early Christian church. Number 14. He raised 3 people from the dead. One of the most incredible things about Jesus was his ability to raise people from the dead. He raised not 1 but 3 people throughout his life. The first person was Jairus' daughter. Jairus, a synagogue leader, begged Jesus to help his sick daughter. But before they arrived, she died. Jesus told the mourners she was just sleeping. "Do not weep. She is not dead, but only sleeping." He took her hand and commanded her to get up. Immediately she came back to life. The next person Jesus resurrected from the dead was a widow's son in the town of Nain. Jesus was passing by when he saw a funeral procession with a widow, mourning her only son. He felt deep compassion for her, so Jesus touched the coffin and told him to get up. Without any hesitation, the boy sat up and started talking. But that's not all. Jesus also raised one of his close friends called Lazarus from the dead. Lazarus had been dead for 4 days when Jesus found out about his demise. Jesus arrived at the tomb, prayed, and called out for his friend to come out. Lazarus walked out, still wrapped in burial clothes. Number 13. Jesus' teachings influenced today's art and culture. Jesus' messages of love, compassion, and forgiveness have inspired countless works of art, music, and literature throughout history. In art, many famous paintings and sculptures show scenes from Jesus' life. Think of Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper or Michelangelo's Pietà. These works not only show important moments from Jesus' life but also convey his teachings and values. Music has also been deeply influenced by Jesus' teachings. Many hymns, gospel songs, and even modern Christian music are inspired by his words. Songs like Amazing Grace and Jesus Loves Me continue to be loved and sung around the world. In literature, Jesus' parables and stories have inspired many writers. Books like The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis includes themes of sacrifice and redemption, reflecting Jesus' teachings. Even in movies and TV shows, Jesus' influence is clear. Films like The Passion of the Christ and series like The Chosen tell his story and share his message with new audiences. Number 12. He turned water into wine. One of the most popular stories we know about Jesus today is the story of when he turned water into wine. This happened at a wedding in a town called Cana. Jesus, his mom, Mary, and his disciples were all invited. During the celebration, they ran out of wine, which was a big problem. Mary noticed this and told Jesus about it. At first, Jesus said it wasn't the right time for him to do miracles, but Mary told the servants to do whatever Jesus said. Nearby, there were 6 stone jars used for Jewish washing rituals. Jesus told the servants to fill them with water. Then Jesus told him to draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. When they did, the water had turned into the most amazing wine. The master of the banquet was surprised because usually people serve the best wine first, but now they had saved the best for last. This miracle was Jesus' first public sign that showed his power and brought joy to the wedding celebration. It also helped his disciples and everyone present to believe in him and his power to do the impossible even more. Number 11. Jesus was likely a carpenter. Before Jesus began his ministry, he lived a normal life in the town of Nazareth. His earthly father, Joseph, was a carpenter, and Jesus learned this trade from him. In those days, being a carpenter meant more than just making furniture. Carpenters built many things, including houses, tools, and other wooden items people needed for daily life. Jesus would have spent a lot of time working with wood and tools, learning how to create and fix things. Growing up, Jesus worked hard and helped Joseph with their carpentry business. Will the carpenter build it? Yes, there's always a carpenter. Even the Lord himself is a carpenter sometimes. How is the Lord a carpenter? Tell me. Didn't the Lord himself tell Noah how to build the ark? This job taught him patience, skill, and the value of hard work. Jesus understood what it was like to have a regular job and be part of a community. His time as a carpenter also connected him with many people in Nazareth. They saw him as a regular person, just like them. This background made his later teachings and miracles even more surprising and impressive to those who knew him. Number 10. He fasted for 40 days and nights. Not long after he was baptized, Jesus did one of the most shocking things done by any Bible character. He fasted for 40 days and nights. Jesus went into the wilderness. Jesus went to the wilderness immediately after his baptism. There, he didn't eat anything for a long time, which is what fasting means. He spent this time alone, praying and thinking deeply. During this period, Jesus faced temptations from the devil. The devil tried to make Jesus turn away from God by offering him food, power, and fame. But Jesus stayed strong and resisted every temptation, showing his deep commitment to God and his mission. After 40 days and nights, Jesus was hungry, as you can imagine. Then angels came and took care of him, providing him with food and comfort. This event shows Jesus' incredible self-discipline, faith, and dedication to God's plan. Number 9. He developed advanced intelligence at a young age. Even as a young child, Jesus showed incredible wisdom and understanding that amazed those around him. Growing up in Nazareth, Jesus would have learned from his parents, Mary and Joseph, and studied the Jewish scriptures. The Bible doesn't give many details about his childhood, but it does mention a specific event when he was 12 years old. During a trip to Jerusalem with his family, Jesus stayed behind in the temple. When his worried parents found him, they were shocked at the scene they witnessed. He was sitting among the teachers, listening and asking questions, which impressed everyone. Till today, this is one of the most fascinating stories in biblical history. Number 8. He communicated directly with Moses and Elijah. Despite the fact that Elijah and Moses existed centuries before he was born, Jesus talked directly with them. It happened on a mountain, where Jesus brought his closest friends, Peter, James, and John, to pray. Suddenly, Jesus' appearance changed, shining brightly. Then, Moses and Elijah appeared and started talking with Jesus. It was astonishing to see them together. Peter, amazed and unsure what to do, suggested building shelters for Jesus, Moses, and Elijah. But as he spoke, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and a voice came from it saying, "This is my son whom I love. With him I am well pleased. This is my son whom I love. Listen to him." Listen to him." The disciples fell to the ground, terrified. When they looked up, they saw only Jesus. This event, which is called the Transfiguration, showed Jesus' divine glory and confirmed his authority. It also connected him with the great figures of Jewish history, Moses representing the law and Elijah representing the prophets. This extraordinary encounter gave the disciples a glimpse of Jesus' true identity and mission on earth. Number 7. He was always full of parables and wise sayings. Jesus was known for using parables and wise words to help people understand important truths about life and God. Jesus' parables were short stories with big meanings. For example, he told the parable of the Good Samaritan to teach about helping others, no matter who they are. Another famous one is the parable of the prodigal son, showing God's love and forgiveness. Also had many wise sayings which were short, memorable sentences packed with wisdom. One of his most famous sayings is, "Do to others as you would have them do to you," known as the Golden Rule. He also said, "Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you," teaching about forgiveness and kindness. Jesus used parables and wise sayings because they were easy to remember and understand. They helped people connect with God's teachings in their everyday lives. Number 6. Jesus performed many miracles. Performing miracles was one of Jesus' many ways of showing his amazing power and love for people. He healed many sick people. He made blind people see, deaf people hear, and even made the lame walk again. People would come to him with all kinds of illnesses, and he would make them well with just a touch or a word. On one occasion, Jesus even calmed a raging storm. One time, he and his disciples were in a boat when a huge storm came up. The disciples were scared, but Jesus just spoke to the wind and the waves, and suddenly everything was calm. One of the most popular examples of Jesus performing miracles was when he fed thousands of people with just a little bit of food. Once, a crowd of people had followed him into a remote place and they were all hungry. Jesus took 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, blessed them, and miraculously they multiplied to feed everyone with plenty left over. These are just a few examples of the many miracles Jesus performed during his time on earth. Number 5. Jesus knew who would betray him. From the beginning, Jesus knew that Judas, one of his 12 disciples, would betray him. During the Last Supper, the final meal Jesus had with his disciples before he was arrested, Jesus spoke about his betrayal. He told his disciples that one of them will betray him. The disciples were shocked and wondered who it could be. Jesus then said, "It is the one to whom I will give this piece of bread after I have dipped it in the dish." He dipped the bread and gave it to Judas. Judas then left to betray Jesus to the religious leaders for 30 pieces of silver. Knowing the betrayal was part of God's plan, Jesus accepted it and continued his mission to save humanity. Number 4. He spoke more than one language. You might not have known about this, but Jesus was a polyglot. You heard that right. He had the ability to speak more than one language. His first language was Aramaic. This was the everyday language of most people in Galilee where Jesus grew up. He used Aramaic in daily conversations and while teaching. For example, when he raised Jairus' daughter, he said the words, "Talitha komi," which means, "Little girl, get up," in Aramaic. The second language Jesus likely spoke was Hebrew. Hebrew was the language of the Jewish scriptures, and Jesus often read and taught from these texts in synagogues. He would have used Hebrew during religious discussions, and while reading the Torah, Jesus might have known some Greek too. Greek was the common language of the Roman Empire and was used in trade and communication between different groups. Lastly, Jesus probably understood some Latin. Latin was the language of the Roman authorities. Though he might not have spoken it often, understanding it would have helped in dealing with Roman officials. By being multilingual, Jesus was able to teach, connect with people, and spread his message. This ability helped him reach a wide audience and share his teachings effectively. Number 3. Jesus faced many unjust trials. Before he was crucified, Jesus faced many unfair trials. First, after Jesus was arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane, he was taken to the high priest Caiaphas. There, the religious leaders tried to find false evidence against him, but they couldn't. They accused him of blasphemy because he said he was the Son of God. This was a serious charge in their law. Next, they sent Jesus to Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor. Pilate couldn't find any reason to punish Jesus. He knew Jesus was innocent, but the crowd demanded Jesus be crucified. Pilate tried to release Jesus, offering to free a prisoner, as was the custom during Passover. The crowd chose Barabbas, a criminal, instead of Jesus. Then, Pilate sent Jesus to Herod, the ruler of Galilee, because Jesus was from there. Herod mocked Jesus and sent him back to Pilate. Pilate, under pressure, finally gave in and sentenced Jesus to be crucified. Throughout these trials, Jesus remained calm and didn't defend himself against the false charges. Number 2. He was crucified at Golgotha. One of the most important moments of Jesus' life that is mostly talked about today is his crucifixion at Golgotha. Golgotha was a place outside Jerusalem where criminals were punished. Jesus was arrested by Roman soldiers after being betrayed by one of his disciples, Judas. He was then put on trial, but the leaders didn't find any guilt in him. But the crowd demanded his crucifixion. Jesus was brutally beaten and forced to carry his own cross to Golgotha. There, Roman soldiers nailed him to the cross. They put a sign above his head that read, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." Jesus suffered greatly on the cross, enduring immense pain. While hanging there, Jesus forgave those who hurt him and even promised paradise to a criminal hanging beside him. Number 1. He knew his death was coming. Jesus talked about his upcoming death many times, preparing his followers for what was going to happen. On one occasion, Jesus told his disciples that he would suffer many things, be rejected by the religious leaders, and be killed. But on the third day, he would rise again. He spoke plainly about this, but his disciples didn't fully understand or accept it at first. Before his arrest, Jesus prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane. He was deeply troubled and asked God if it was possible to avoid the suffering ahead, but he ultimately submitted to God's will, showing he knew and accepted what was coming. Jesus also shared a final meal, the Last Supper, with his disciples. He spoke about his body and blood being given up. This was a clear indicator that he knew his death was coming. Is there any fact that you think we missed? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, share, and hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on our latest videos. Thanks for watching.